Welcome to the book of Hebrews Restored, chapter 4, session 5b, titled, Looking Unto Jesus. In the last session, we saw the purpose of Hebrews 11 in light of its position in the practical application section of Hebrews. We now have arrived at chapter 12. This is the beginning of the climax of the masterful and powerful presentation by Paul that he was trying to convince his Jewish countrymen of the roles of Jesus Christ as their Messiah. Verses 1 and 2 in chapter 12 are a synthesis of the different themes that have been building throughout this epistle. This has been their best opportunity to believe, their day of visitation, for those Hebrews to believe and receive the corresponding rewards. This is confirmed by the next "let us" statement. Hebrews 12:1. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside, which means to put off, renounce, every weight, and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience, with endurance, the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. These verses have been very stirring and a clarion call to all believers. Many rousing sermons have been preached based upon them. They called to both sides of the first century church, the Gentile Christians and the Jewish Christians. But I think we can learn even more about them if we see how they reached out to the Hebrews back then. The applications to the others are no less viable, for that's the nature of Scripture. It's like gems which reflect light in many directions, reaching all men's hearts to kindle righteous acts. But while we are here in this class, we should acknowledge what they first communicated to the Hebrews after all that had been said up to this point. That group of Hebrews was a mixed crowd. Some born again, some not. So already we can anticipate a spectrum of applications. The word wherefore introduces this pivotal statement. This is divine logic. The first of four great calls to action, gathering up all the prior profound facts and deep insights and purple smoke and pressing them upon the hearer's conscience, calling for that revelation to invoke the proper response. This first trumpet call for action is introduced by an unusual word translated wherefore. It is the Greek word toi garun. This is a combination of toi, which means indeed, plus gar, which means for, and un, O-U-N, which means therefore. It's a very powerful and emphatic way to introduce what must follow in light of all that has preceded. Thayer, in his lexicon, says it is, quote, introducing a conclusion with some special emphasis or formality, unquote. The second call to action in Hebrews 12 is chapter 12, verse 12, and it is introduced by D-I-O, which is a combination of dia, on account of, plus ha, which means which, on account of which. So, therefore, in Hebrews 12:12 is looking forward. The lexical info in BibleHub.com states, quote, "Do" is the New Testament's concise hinge word for drawing necessary conclusions. Whenever the Spirit-inspired writers wish to declare, quote, "Given all that has just been said, this must follow," unquote, "do" supplies the pivot. Translators render it "therefore," or "for this reason," or "wherefore." But its enduring value lies in clarifying that a stated fact inevitably produces a stated result. The term never weakens to mere suggestion. It signals obligation, certainty, or logical necessity. BibleHub also informs that, quote, "Paul is the most frequent user employing do to wield theological indicatives to moral imperatives." So this is a pivotal word, turning insight into action, indicative into imperative, assurance into encouragement, orthodoxy into orthopraxy, that is, universally accepted doctrine into universally accepted practice. There are also a third and fourth call in Hebrews 12 later on, introduced by do in 12:28 and also 13:12, which we're going to cover in future sessions. But now I return to Hebrews 12:1, which is the first salvo in this conclusion of the practical application and conclusion section of Hebrews. Verses 1 and 2 of chapter 12 were a big, quote, "what to do with all this," unquote, statement. It had multiple levels. First level was seeing that they were surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses. Well, what was that? The cloud of witnesses was absolutely not referring to the Old Testament patriarchs looking down at them from heaven. That Greek-influenced heresy about the dead would have driven the Hebrews away, not been encouraging to them, because the dead had not been raised yet, and even now, and then, we're still waiting for their resurrections. What then was the cloud of witnesses? Martus. We must ask the context for that answer. It was the witnessing that was first referred to in Hebrews 11:2. That good report, martureo, or witnessing, reporting of the Old Testament elders. Then the chapter began to enumerate that witness. Abel obtained a righteous witness, martureo, witnessing, reporting, in Hebrews 11:3. Then Enoch had the testimony, martureo, witnessing, reporting, that he pleased God, in Hebrews 11:5. Then all the rest of the believers in that august list obtained a good report, martureo, witnessing, reporting, according to Hebrews 11:39. That is the cloud of witnesses. I think that's pretty clear. Their exemplary acts of faith were their witness. Hebrews 11:4 literally corroborates this, quote, saying, "By it, the witness Abel obtained, he being dead yet speaks." What was their witness or report of? Number one, their faith believing. And second, their motivation, their expectations. Because of their witnessed and reported examples, we and the Hebrews are exhorted to then let us lay aside apotithemi, put off or renounce every weight. The Greek word for weight is spelled O-G-K-O-S, but it's pronounced O-N-K-O-S. onkos. That conversion of that G to an N is what's called a nasal gamma in Greek. It's wherever you had a double gamma or a gamma kappa, GK, or a gamma chi, a GCH. When you run into those in Greek, they are transliterated and pronounced as if the initial gamma was a nu, an N. Otherwise, just try to say those consonant combinations, GG or GK, etc., without slobbering all over yourself. Onkos means an encumbrance, a burdensome thing. This word was made famous in Jesus' Matthew 11 maxim. Matthew 11:28, Matthew 11:28, Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden, onkos, is light. It's also used in Matthew 23:4, referring to the doctrines of the scribes and Pharisees. Matthew 23:1, Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you to observe, that observe and do, but do ye not after their works. For they say and do not, for they bind heavy burdens, onkos, and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. In the context of the book of Hebrews, what would those burdensome things have been? To lay aside every weight. Yes, they were the Pharisees' interpretations of the law that earlier had been proven to have been changed, that law which made nothing perfect, and that law which is a shadow of good things to come, but not their very image. Then the next encouragement was regarding renouncing the sin which so easily besets, or ensnares, or entangles, or encircles. That word in the Greek is euperistatos, and this is a hapax logemonon, an only usage in the New Testament. So, yes, we all need to do that in general, but in context, to those it was first encouraged, the specific sin had been mentioned earlier in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 3:12. Take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief, departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is still called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we are all made partakers of Christ, if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. So what was that sin? It was the sin of unbelief, of hardening the heart. Then they were encouraged to run with endurance the race, agon, that contest, that struggle, that resistance from the world that is set before us. That word set before is pro-kami. It means destined for us. You see, we're all destined to face this race. Our running lanes are marked out for us because our ministries have content, extent, and deferment. Our running lanes are each different, customized. Therefore, we cannot be racing against each other, which would require equal lanes. We're racing against the world in our own lane because of its connotation of destiny being set before us. This fits perfectly in context with the expectations which motivated those Hall of Fame believers in Hebrews 11. Remember, the second theme was their destiny. They were looking forward to that Also, it was common knowledge of those who ran in races, because those who ran in races ran naked, so that nothing would hinder them or slow them down. Wow, that portrayed a vivid picture of not letting anything burden or entangle us as we race. Or would it be better said, as we streak towards our goals? Whoa, Nelly. The next phrase is, quote, looking unto Jesus, unquote. That word looking is aphorao, which is a combination of apo and horao. It is a rare verb, which implies to look away from all else and focus upon one thing. That was the same thing as what the entire book of Hebrews had been doing. It had featured the first century beliefs concerning the roles of Jesus of Nazareth at the right hand of God. It all was beautifully summed up here in the next phrase. The author and finisher of our faith. That phrase is the figure of speech, merismos. The author and finisher is an expression like from A to Z. And it means to encompass the entirety of something. This involved the main themes of Hebrews. In an earlier session, I traced one of those themes, which was all the uses of the word family, of teleos. Teleos means and we saw all the verbs and nouns that were related. The whole family occurs throughout the book of Hebrews. Some of those high points were Hebrews 2:10. For it became him for whom are all things and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain, archegos, architect, pioneer, of their salvation perfect. Teleao, that's the verb form, which means brought to an end, or fulfilled, or matured through sufferings. Verse 11, for both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause he's not ashamed to call them brethren. Hebrews 5:8, though he were a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered, and being made perfect, teleao, fulfilled, reached his destiny, matured. He became the author, the cause, or anything of a cause residing. He became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. Next one, Hebrews 7:28. For the law makes men high priests which have infirmity, but the word of the oath, which was since the law, makes the Son, who is consecrated, teleao, reached his end, fulfilled, forevermore. The next example, Hebrews 9:24. For Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Nor yet that he should offer himself often, as the high priest entered into the holy place every year with blood of others. For then must he have often suffered since the foundation of the world, but now, once in the end, suntelia, it's related to telos, which means consummation. Once now in the end, consummation of the world, and that's not world, it should be ages, hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And the last example, Hebrews 10:14, for by one offering he hath perfected, teleao, brought to an end, forever, them that are sanctified. So, those multiple verses aptly describe being the finisher, the ender. But now we turn our attention to the other term, author. This is the Greek word archegos, which has a number of meanings which are related to being a first one, a beginner. This concept comes from its root word, arche, which means beginning. Then, in that sense, the one who is at the beginning of any series, or the first one, or a ruler. Arche can also be a first cause. Then, the related word archegos personifies that beginning into the beginner, the first one, the originator, the pioneer, author, founder, and then the leader, captain, prince, or ruler. In all this, we see a good example of the nature of word meanings. There's the root word with its basic meaning. Then there are applied meanings. But how do those additional meanings arise? They're established over time by usage. Now, do we have the privilege of merely choosing the meaning in that list that fits our theology? No. There are contexts which determine those other meanings. And there's a context here in Hebrews. For instance, a Trinitarian believer would favor the meanings which reside in the range of meaning related to a beginner, a first cause. But do you remember how in Hebrews 1:2 we saw that the Orthodox had warped the interpretation there and tried to support that Logos doctrine, which said that God created the world through Jesus? But we saw that was a lie, because the word world there in Hebrews 1:2 was not cosmos, it was aion, and should have been translated ages. So it wasn't talking about what they wanted. Furthermore, do you remember that I proved that the Hebrews, to whom this epistle was written, strongly resisted Greek influences. Therefore, the Greek-influenced idea of Jesus being a first cause would have been rejected. Because of this, no matter how pretty or poetic it might seem, I also have to reject the translation of author here. Because despite Tyndale's affection for it, because he translated it that way, Jesus was not the author, God was. It's just like Paul. He was not the author of this epistle, God was. Paul was the writer, an agent. Tyndale was a Trinitarian. What would you expect? Though a martyr of the faith, he still was influenced by Orthodox theology. Jesus was the agent, having something to do with a beginning. But he was not the first cause. God was. The Hebrews would have strenuously rejected and resisted anything else. Throughout Hebrews, Jesus was called the archierus, the chief priest, the high priest. That arch, A-R-C-H, prefix was utilizing the ruler connotation of arche, not the beginner. He was the ruling priest, not the first priest. Aaron was the first priest. So, that's part of this context. There is the other use of archegos also in Hebrews chapter 2. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 9. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man, for it became him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain, archegos, of their salvation perfect, teleao, through sufferings. Here, the King James translators chose the other connotation, the ruler connotation. Well, how was Jesus the captain, archegos, of our salvation? He was the leader, in that he was the first one, as in the firstborn from among the dead. He was the leader also, in that we were identified with him because he died for us. He was our substitute. He was the last Adam, just like the first Adam, initiating a chain of consequences that affected all of us. Jesus was the first to experience a different chain of benefits, not consequences like the first Adam, but benefits for those who believe in him. But even though he was a first one pioneering salvation, he still was an agent and not an author, for God energized what Jesus exercised. God, Jesus' Father, was the one who foreknew and energized all the preparatory work of the ages, those dispensations that were commanded into being with his rhema, those audible phenomenal words. The Father told his Son what to do. That authorship was God's work. Do you see the difference? That was the difference which made this term acceptable to the Hebrews. To really establish this concept, I need to explain what semantic domains are. The Verbum Study app on the internet explains semantic domains as follows. Quote, to understand biblical language, you have to understand semantic domains. A semantic domain is a range of potential meanings of a word. For example, in English, the word run can mean to operate or to move at a fast speed. Both potential meanings are part of the semantic domain of the word run. Different words can also have overlapping meanings, such as man and human. Understanding a word's range of potential meanings provides a starting point for discovering what a word means in a specific passage. Searching for meanings can help you explore semantic domains so you can uncover resonances in a biblical text or trace concepts and themes throughout the Bible. A semantic domain, or semantic field, it's sometimes called, is a group of words in a language related by a common theme, concept, or area of meaning. Like rain comprises rain, drizzle, or downpour. Or kinship domain includes father, mother, or cousin. It represents a specific area of knowledge or cultural emphasis, helping to organize how language structures thought, understand word relationships, build dictionaries, and even facilitate computer searches. Now, I'm going to read to you something from the NIDA, L-O-U-W, NIDA, N-I-D-A, lexicon. This lexicon is different from any other dictionary because the word meanings are organized under these semantic domains. I'll just read a couple paragraphs from page 6 of the introduction. The basis for various semantic domains and subdomains consists of three major classes of semantic features: shared, distinctive, and supplementary. The shared features are those elements of the meaning of lexical items which are held in common by a set of lexical items. The distinctive features are those which separate meanings one from another, and the supplementary features are those which may be relevant in certain contexts or may play primarily a connective or associative role. In Domain 19, titled Physical Impact, for example, kopalthizo and masitizo all share the features of physical impact involving hitting or striking. They differ, however, in certain distinctive features. Colaphizo designates striking or beating with the fist. Rabizo designates beating or striking with a stick or rod. Masatizo and masatizo designate beating with a whip. They're all in the same domain. You see? The terms masatizo and masatizao also differ from colaphizo and rabizo in that they normally refer to officially sanctioned punishment. Within any domain or subdomain, those meanings which are first treated tend to be of a more generic nature, while more specific meanings follow. For example, Domain 19 Physical Impact, the first item, 19-1, includes tupto and paiao, all which may occur with the generic meaning of strike or hit an object one or more times, but without specifying the particular manner in which the hitting or striking takes place. The meanings of these terms are then followed by other, less generic expressions until finally one encounters a term which designates the act of beating someone on the head. They're all different words, but they're all in the same domain. See? So there is, however, no way in which one can move step by step from highly generic to specifically limited or restricted areas of meaning, nor is it possible to set up strict logical structures of binary contrasts as a way of classifying large sets of meanings. In fact, meanings relate to one another in diverse ways and involve a number of different dimensions so that they constitute complex clusters or constellations. In a sense, such meanings relate to one another in a manner similar to diverse dialects of the same language. So you see, those are how domains relate. They're all words that have a general meaning, but then they differ in multiple ways. Now, Lunita gives the following spectrum for arche and archegos. All right? Arche means beginning in the sense of aspect, or beginning in the sense of time. First cause, sphere of authority, ruler, supernatural power, elementary aspect, corner. Those are all the different domains under arche. Archegos can be either initiator or pioneer, leader. So you see, the entire range of meanings is split into those semantic domains. Now, then in the main body of the Lunita lexicon, each semantic domain is presented with all the synonyms in that related word meaning, and they're in order. So, for example, with archegos, the initiator domain is domain 68.2. So I'm going to go to 68.2, which is on page 655. And so 68.1 is archomai, arche, to initiate an action, process, or state of being, to begin, to commence, or beginning. Then it gives examples. And then domain number 68.2 is archegos, one who causes something to begin, initiator, founder, originator. Then it gives the founder of salvation, or the one who institutes salvation. Hebrews 2:10. For another interpretation of archegos, look at domain 36.6. So now I'm going to go to domain 36.6, which is on page 466. 36.6, archegos. a person who as originator or founder of a movement continues as the leader, a pioneer leader, founding leader. Wow, that really fits Jesus, doesn't it? Their pioneer leader to salvation, Hebrews 2:10. In order to indicate clearly the significance of archegos in Hebrews 2:10, it may be important to employ a translation such as, quote, who established a way of salvation and leads people to it. But it also is possible to understand archegos in Hebrews 2:10 as only the initiator or founder, and then it cross-references back to Domain 68:2. But boy, I really see that he who established a way of salvation and leads people to it. That's really interesting. The same can be used with the synonym for archegos in Hebrews 5 that we read. Hebrews 5:8, though he were a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. Hebrews 5:9, and being made perfect, teleao, he became the author. And that is itios, a synonym. Author, cause, that which the cause of anything resides, of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. But since Hebrews 2:10 and Hebrews 5:8 and Hebrews 12 are so closely related, they got to be talking about the same thing. See, because we know that God was the author. He was the first one. All right? He laid the groundwork. But it could not happen without the agent whom God energized. So it could not happen without the agency of Jesus. And in that sense, Jesus was a cause. Now, Lunita catalogs that word itia, or itios, ition, adjectives, and itios, noun, as domain 89.15, cause or reason. And in that 89 domain, also 89.16 is where we find arche, a synonym. So 89.15 is on page 779 in Lunita, domain 89.15. Itia, or itios, reason or cause for an event or state, reason, cause, source, because of. And then it gives examples like Acts 28:20. For this cause, therefore, have I called for you to see you and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel am I bound with this chain. Or Acts 19:40. For we are in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar. That was that riot with the silversmiths. There being no cause whereby we might give account for this concourse. So, from all this that I've given you from Lunita is the lexical information that comprises in the verse. That's that aspect of hermeneutics, biblical interpretation. But now, to complete the job, we must add the other elements which make our ministry unique. We must recognize the influence of the teleos family, the word repetition that we saw throughout Hebrews. This emphasizes him as ended, fulfilled, matured, arrived at his intended function, his destiny. That's all part of him being the teleotes, the ender. We must also recognize the influence of the structure, especially what Ren has been developing, which places this passage in the practical application section of Hebrews. The Hebrews were to deeply consider this presentation in the epistle regarding the roles of Jesus Christ and then take action. They were to believe it either to the end of receiving salvation, or if they were already saved, to hold on to it, to hold fast to their confession. The next thing we have to do is recognize the cultural aspects that we know about. How Jesus was a leader at God's right hand. He was an appointed leader. He was subservient to God, who gave him the authority. Although he was very powerful, he was the grand vizier like Joseph was to Pharaoh. Also, we must recognize the influence of figures of speech. And here, this is in a merismos, that A to Z construction. And that, in itself, greatly influences this meaning in the semantic domain. It helps us choose, because it forces the range of meaning of archegos towards the beginner meaning, because it is setting in opposition to ender. Beginner and ender. See, I think that's very clear. But also, that beginning is tempered by the other influences of the prior occurrences of arche, ruler, which specifies that Jesus is an under-ruler, an appointee, an agent. So, he can't be a beginner in the sense that he was a first cause. It doesn't go that far. See? But he still is a beginner in the sense of being the agent that brought it to pass. So you see all those things that have to be weighed in order to arrive at the proper meaning of Christ, the archegos. There are many titles ascribed to him throughout the book of Hebrews. But all those titles are subservient. They're subject to God, being empowered by him. For example, he's the heir of all things. He's the reflection of God's glory, not the source. He's the main character of God's master plan. He's the bringer into legal effect for God's regal proclamations, those rhema. He's the son. He's the firstborn. It is he who is on the throne in charge of all things, but God put him there. He is the apostle and high priest. These and the rest of the concepts are all brought together here in Hebrews 12:2, wrapped up in this profound merismos from A to Z. The Hebrews were encouraged to look away from all else and to fill their eyes and minds with him. The next phrase in Hebrews 12:2 is, quote, for the joy that was set before him. Interestingly, the word for is the Greek word anti. The REV Bible has an excellent note regarding that. Quote, because the word anti can mean instead of, some very knowledgeable theologians, including the authors of the BDAG lexicon, think the meaning of the verse is that Jesus endured the cross instead of experiencing the joy set before him. The main reason for asserting that is that the grammatically anti seems to usually be in the sense of instead of in the New Testament. The response to that argument is that, while that might be true, anti is not always used in the sense of instead of. In fact, that is not its meaning in Hebrews 12:16, later in the same chapter. In any case, theologians who say anti means instead of here say that Jesus had a choice of having the joy set before him, or he could endure the cross. Many of them say that the joy Jesus gave up was the joy of living forever in heaven with God and not experiencing the cross. However, other theologians, such as William Lane, feel the joy Jesus gave up could not be this eternal joy of being in heaven, but would have had to have been some temporal joy he could have had on earth that he gave up for the cross. But what that particular joy was not exactly known. The majority of commentators in almost every English version, including the REV, take the phrase to mean that Jesus endured the cross for, or more clearly, because of the joy set before him. The joy of purchasing redemption for mankind and earning his place as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Well, let me tell you what I think that joy was. The joy that was set before Jesus fits with the expectations of all the Hall of Fame believers that had been building throughout Hebrews 11. In context, Jesus was looking forward to what God had promised. It was set before him, prokami, which means destined for him. So, it was destined for him not only in Scripture, but God also gave Jesus a real taste of that joy at the Transfiguration. There, in the Transfiguration, for a few precious, delicious moments, he experienced what it would be like if he succeeded. Matthew 17:1 says, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, brought them to a high mountain apart, and he was transfigured. He changed form before them, and his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. Mark 9:2 says basically the same thing. Luke 9:28. And it came to pass about 8 days after these sayings. So it was after 6 and about 8. So in between those, he took Peter, John, and James and went up into a mountain apart to pray. And as he prayed, the fashion, appearance of his face was altered, heteros. It was not the same nature or kind as it was before. It was altered, and his raiment was white and glistering. So, Jesus experienced something. He got a sample. This, I believe, was the joy that was set before him. Prokami. He was our prototype. See, because in Hebrews 12:1 and 2, there was something set before Jesus, and there is something set before us. Same word. So, are we going to be motivated by what the theologians said? Or are we going to be motivated by the context, our destiny, just like he was motivated by his destiny? That makes it worth it to lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily besets us and run our race. Why? Because we are going to experience the same motivation and joy that Jesus did. Philippians 3:20 says, for our conversation, our citizenship is in heaven, from whence also we expect for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall change our vile body, that it may be fashioned like unto his glorious body, according to the working whereby he's able even to subdue all things unto himself. Well, how's that gonna work? 1 Corinthians 15:35 says, 1 Corinthians 15:35, some men will say, well, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Thou fool, that which thou sowest is not quickened, except to die. And that which thou sowest not that body that shall be, but bare grain. It may chance of wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as it pleased him. And to every seed its own body. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of man, another of flesh of beasts, another fishes, another of birds. Well, there are also celestial bodies, and bodies terrestrial, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. There's one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. For one star differs from another star in glory, so also is the resurrection of the dead. It's sown in corruption, it's raised in corruption. It's sown in dishonor, it's raised in glory. It's sown in weakness, it's raised in power. It's sown a natural body, it's raised a spiritual body. So there is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was a life-giving spirit. Howbeit, that which was not at first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterwards that which is spiritual. The first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. And as is the earthy, such are they also that are earthy, and as is the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the earthly, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. So just as the joy that was set before Jesus encouraged him, knowing our destiny encourages us. We can run a race. We can lay aside every burden and entangling sin and look away from all else and press onward toward the prize of the high calling in Christ. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And every man that hath this hope in him purifies himself, even as he is pure. 1 John 3:2-3 is parallel with Hebrews 12:1-2. Then, despising the shame, back to Hebrews 12:1-2, is the word kata phroneo, which literally, kata is down, and phroneo is thinking, down thinking. That paints a picture of something. It means thinking nothing of, disregarding, ignoring. The King James translation of despising actually may carry too strong of a connotation. Matthew 6:24 is an example. No man can serve two masters, for either he'll hate the one and love the other, or he'll hold to the one and disregard the other. You can't serve God and mammon. You can't be in love with both. Jesus sat down at God's right hand. This is repeated throughout Hebrews, and as such occurs here in Hebrews 12:2, the great summary statement. In early encouragements, the Hebrews were exhorted to hold fast to their confession. The holding fast being in both senses, holding tight once they had confessed, or grabbing tight if they were embracing it for the first time. So, Hebrews 12:2 referred to both situations as a great summary. Wow. So, that's where we are. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside, renounce every weight, burdensome thing, and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, destined for us, looking away from all else unto Jesus, the author, the archegos, the pioneer leader, the beginner in that sense, and finisher of our faith, from A to Z, all of it, who for the joy that was set before him, destined for him, endured the cross, discounting the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. And we shall be like him when we see him as he is. Bless ya.